do these directions tell us that we can use our calculator or that we should use our calculator? Kaylee. A calculator?
No.
They don't say it outright. But what do the directions say that point us to whether or not we're supposed to use our calculator? Yeah. Right. Yeah, let me go back.
I don't know how to like make a square or like solve a square root.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that, because that's exactly what we're talking about. It says go to the nearest tenth, which means decimals, which means don't just stop at the square roots. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on our answer for number 1, because our answer was perfect, but we didn't get it into decimals. Okay? Now, there are different types of calculators that solve this different ways. The long story short of it is we did really good work, but we need to figure out, I'm going to move this up so I have a little more room, how to get this into decimals, okay? Now, we're not going to go too crazy. We're going to leave everything and just say, how do we do square root of 22? Now, just for sake of illustration, most of you guys, at the beginning of the year, in your math department letter that you guys were supposed to get and read, the supply that we said that Algebra 1 kids needed to have was a TI calculator in the 30s range. And some of you might have like a Casio, some of you guys might have some other thing. These are the ones that we wanted you to get, a TI scientific calculator in the 30s. This one's a 30, this one's a 36. Some of you have been borrowing mine, but I haven't gotten too frustrated because that's how Coach tracked it with you guys last semester, borrowing my calculators. However, it would be nice in something like this if you had one calculator you could use the entire year and get really used to, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and just pass around the calculator so you guys can look at. There are 2 different ones. I'll start them on either side of the room. You guys can just keep them going all the way through. I guess you can take a picture of it. I'm just going to make sure that you guys know how to do. They both have the exact same square root button. Now some calculators are different than others. Some nicer ones like this, and then you guys sometimes move on. I'm going to show you my graphing calculator, what the button looks like. It's basically the same idea as this one. Usually what I do, if I'm trying to learn a calculator, I pick a square root that I know. Like, what's an easy square root that we know? 4. Square root of 4. We know the answer should be 2. So I figure out, okay, there's a square root button. Do I hit that first and then do 4, enter? Or do I hit the 4 first and then the square root button? 2. Let me try another easy one, like 16 square root should be 4. Okay, now I've learned 9 square root button. It's 3. I'm going to go ahead and start passing them. If you guys already know how to use your calculator, that's great. Just keep passing it. I want you guys to test that in this calculator. There is a square root button. It's in the middle-ish, middle top-ish on the right-hand side. It looks similar to the button on my graphing calculator I'm going to show you right here. Now in the graphing calculator, you kind of have to hit the shift button or the second button because it's actually one of the top choices. And you do get to do things like actually see it under the square root. In your guys' calculators, you don't get to see it under the square root. But you could test even in a nice calculator and say, okay, do some that I know what it should be before I go do a one that I don't really know. Well, let's go ahead and for this problem, I'm going to go ahead and do the square root of 22. Now remember, those calculators, you have to hit 22 first and then the square root button. I want you guys to see if you can figure out from that calculator that's being passed around that the square root of 22 is 4.690415, etc., etc. Now, at the very top, what did they tell us to round to? The nearest 10. Dylan, I need your help today. I need you to focus. I can't keep calling. So as I look at my calculator, I'm going to write in 4 point. How do I round to the nearest 10? How many decimal places is 10? Just 1, but I look at 2, right? So look at the 9. Does the 9 say 6 should go up or stay the same? It should go up. So I'm going to put 4.7. Okay. Now once I'm able to find the square root of 22, Caleb, what's going on then? I'm over here. Okay, and the board's up there. Once I have 4.7, I need to actually find my decimal answer. So let me put away my calculator. Do you guys remember what we do with plus or minus? How many answers are there? Yep. So I'm going to do 1 plus 4.7 divided by 3. And 1 minus. Now, in your calculator, what order should you do this to get the right answer?
Division.
No.
But it's adding.
Yeah, do the addition first. So you can add the top. If you want to use your calculator, you can. If you can do it mental math, it's 1.0 plus 4.7. In PEMDAS, it does say multiplication or division first, except numerators and denominators are like parentheses. Numerators and denominators have grouping symbols, they're just not usually shown, which is why we're doing the addition first and the subtraction first. This one's a little bit harder. You could do that in your calculator. Again, 1 minus 4.7. We're almost there. Can we plug this into our calculators, guys? Yeah. We can do decimals. Now, some people are doing it for us. Thank you, thank you. I'm going to make sure that I agree with you. When we divide, there's one answer. What's the other one, Justin? Good. So if we're just rounding to the nearest tenth, the first one's easy because we're just going to do 1.9. And the second one, yeah, just negative 1.2. So at the end of the day, we'll say x is equal to, here are two decimals rounded to the nearest 10, negative 1.2 and 1.9. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys can keep passing the calculator if you want to make sure that you can do these problems. But if you get to a nasty square root, you cannot simplify anymore. It does say in the directions you may round to the nearest 10. And as a result, we're going to use our calculator for that. Let me go ahead and minimize that. Notes open. Hopefully you guys just finished this example from yesterday. If you didn't, take a couple seconds and make sure you write down the final two answers with decimals. That's what your homework is going to want. Okay? And now let's go ahead and start on section 9.5, part 2. Now, section 9.5, part 2 starts with, in a sense in our warm-up, review. Section 9.5, part 2 starts with review. Bless you, bless you. All right, here we go. Notes open. Remember, turning in notes on the day of the test. It's your responsibility. You guys don't need me to baby you. Here we go. We're going to do some major review right now, okay? Because there have been ultimately now 4 different ways that we have learned. There are 4 different ways that we have learned to answer this question. Find the zeros. Now, another word for zeros that we're going to write in our notes today that you've seen before, it can also be the real solutions. It's a synonym. You guys know from English what a synonym is, right? It means the same thing, just another way of saying it. Real solutions or x-intercepts. The zeros of a function are the real solutions. Another way of saying it is the x-intercepts. The problems might look a little different, but what you're solving for is the exact same. Now, what we're going to do, hold on, Rob, is answer this question 4 different ways with 4 different problems. And the reason we're doing this, let me show you in your homework tonight, the second half of your homework, okay? The second half of your homework, finishing section 9.5, if the computer actually loads it. It's thinking. It's looking really awkward. I apologize. I don't know why. Okay, your homework tonight goes up through number 44, right? There we go. Your homework tonight starts with these 2 sections, which says not to find, but to figure out how many answers there are. This one, how many answers there are. This is the section I'm preparing you for right now, the very last section of homework. Guys, what do the directions say in these problems, 37 to 44? Any method. You don't have to actually write me a sentence explaining your choice of method. You don't have to do that. But let me show you your choices of methods, okay? So in your notes right now, we're going to review and see your choices of methods. There are 4 different choices, and you get to choose which one you like the best. And it might change for different problems. The very first method could be going back to factoring. Okay? Factoring would say, if the last sign is positive, the signs stay the same. Looking at the middle, I know it's going to be a minus and a minus. What can I put because of x squared? X minus and x minus. What factors of positive 2 sum to be negative 3? Negative 2 and negative 1. Don't those add to be negative 3? So I can just say x minus 1 and x minus 2. Because negative 1 plus negative 2 works to be negative 3. Now, do you guys remember with factoring, how do we keep going to solve? You split them up. Remember?
Oh, yeah. And then that's x equals 1, x equals 2.
And when you add 1 to the other side, and when you add 2 to the other side. If you like factoring, sometimes this can go very quickly if it's a nice problem. If you don't like factoring, maybe this isn't the first one that you will try. Now, the next one that we learned how to do was in section, I think, 9.2. And that's square roots. Now, I'm not saying we couldn't use factoring. For a few of you that like factoring, we would factor out what's in common, the GCF. And maybe you could see that we could factor this one with difference of squares. And we could get answers pretty quickly of plus or minus 4. Now, some of you, that was way too fast. So let me put that in parentheses and say we could have factored. But this method says use square roots. To use square roots, we say, hey, all that's in there with the variable is just an x squared. So we can add the 48 to the other side. Exactly. And we would get 3x squared. It's a little close. Let me spread it out. 3x squared is equal to 48. Now pause. We don't want a square root yet, because the squared is not by itself.
Oh,
Divide by 3 first. Can anyone help me with what 48 divided by 3 is? 16. Good job. Now that this x squared is alone, what can I do? Put in a square root. It's a positive number, so how many answers do I need to have? 2. You are going to have 1 square root, but I need the plus or minus. I need the plus or minus. Now check it. On the left, don't I just have x alone? And on the right, what is the answer to square root of 16? Question, did that end up with the same answer as factoring? So you have choices. You don't have to use factoring to find zeros. Sometimes you can use square roots. But pause. I would advise only use square roots when you have a squared that you can get alone. If you have an expression like number 1, could I have gotten the x's only being squared alone? No. There's another x. And the other x messes me up. I cannot get the x only being squared because there's another x. So using the square root method does not always work. It only works when there's only an x squared or an expression squared. Now, the next thing we learned was completing the square. Caleb, I'd rather you be looking up at the board. If you're not writing, you should be at least watching. The next method was completing the square. For completing the square, we ask ourselves, what is 1/2 of 6 squared? And what do we get? Is this 9? No. So we say, uh-oh. That 4 I don't want. What would you guys do with the 4 if you don't want it? Can't get rid of it, but you can add it to the other side. The 4 was not the special number that I wanted. So this is incomplete. I'm going to add the 4 to either side. And then we say, okay, we want to put our special number in. So then as we already went down, we saw that 1/2 of 6 squared ends up being 3 squared, which is 9. Good. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to write it down here, but I'm running out of room, so I'm going to go to the other side. Plus 9 on one side, plus 9 on the other side. Now let me come on up. Good. I hear someone already saying 4 plus 9 is 13. And what am I going to do with this perfect square trinomial? Factor. Good. I keep the x. I have all addition. And what is that number in there? Good.
Oh.
Yeah, because we look inside the parentheses earlier. Just the 1/2 b. Or ask yourself the question, what was squared to get 9? Exactly. Now that I have a square root alone, I'm going to put in a square root to undo. What I do to one side, I do to the other. It's a positive number, so I put a plus or minus. It's kind of hard to see when you zoom in. I put a plus or minus. And what happens to the square and the square root? They cancel. What is left on the left-hand side? Good. X plus 3 is left. What's left on the right? A yucky square root. You know, since our directions are letting us round to tenths, what are we going to do with that yucky square root? Yeah. We can find a decimal. Justin, go ahead. What'd you get?
3.6.
Good, good, good. Thank you, everybody.
Now
For one of the answers, right?
Wait, is that
Remember-
13?
Yeah, it's a 13. Sorry, it's on the edge of the board. And we're going to do 2 different equations. Remember? We have a positive 3.6 and a negative 3.6. Then we're going to subtract 3. You'd have to line it up, and we would end up with positive 0.6, or you would subtract 3, or negative 6.6. You could use your calculators to help you on those. Ultimately, mental math is very important to get down, just for like practical life skills, but right now we're just trying to understand the process. Is there a question? Tyler?
Right after you get 9,
Yeah.
Where does it go from there? Because it looks like it's just x plus 3 squared.
Well, we factor this side, and then we combine those two to be 15. So we factor this. X plus 3 times x plus 3. 3 times 3 makes 9, and 3 plus 3 makes 6. Does that kind of make sense?
So whatever number it is, it's always gonna go.
When you complete the square, you're always able to factor to a perfect square using the first variable and using the square root of 9 or number in parentheses. And then we use the square root, Tyler, to undo the squared, and then we're on our way to the answer. Okay, the last way we just started learning yesterday.
Ooh, I like what I can do.
That's not bad. It's not bad to like it, but we just have to be able to use it and to get the right answers, Josh.
Could I get my calculator? I forgot to do that this week.
Yeah, go ahead, just because we're using it right now. Let's help. Now, it's going to be an awful song today. I know, it's going to be awful. Barry and Alan, just make sure to whisper. Okay, quadratic formula. X equals negative b. Plus or minus b squared minus 4ac. 4ac over
2A.
There you go.
Yeah.
At that point, we only need to be able to figure out who is A, who is B, who is C. But wait. Aren't we getting that from standard form? Pause. I cannot take A, B, and C the way that is written. Some of you could figure it out. I need to make sure that everyone understands. I need them all together. What's wrong? It's the 8. He's on the wrong side. So I would need to subtract 8 from both sides. I need to get them all on one side first. Then I ask myself the question, who is A?
1.
Why 1? What's in front if there's nothing? And understood, there is 1 there. Let's make sure we're focused.
So we just put the 8 on.
So A is 1. We had to move the 8 on the other side because we need them all together for our formula,
For just the quadratic.
for just the quadratic formula.
Like on the test, we can use any of those methods? Or,
If I say by any method, I'll probably have some where I make you use the quadratic formula since it's new, or I make you use completing the square since it's not.
yeah, because to me, completing the square is the easiest.
That's okay. Now, kiddos, we know that A is 1. What's B? -2. You gotta be careful of the negatives. What's C? -8. So then we have x equals, help me out, negative b plus or minus,
Here,
Square root
who squared?
Negative
2
2
over.
B squared minus 4
times
A
negative
c
Over 2.
all over 2a. If we can't get the numbers plugged in right, we're going to be in some serious trouble, right? But if we can get them plugged in right, then we'll be okay. Now some of you guys are already trying to simplify. Usually we start under the square root, like you saw yesterday.
That's 2.
We can also say, good, a negative times a negative is a positive. Under the square root, we are going to square first, which is 4. Good.
And then minus 3.
Minus, now, what is 4 times 1?
Negative 4.
Kind of. Times -8.
32.
So we're going to have a negative 4 times a -8, which is a positive 32. You see a negative and a negative, right?
Yeah.
A negative times a negative is a positive.
10.
2 times 1 is 2 in this example. Then we can say x is equal, no, we cannot simplify the 2's because there is a plus, which means both pieces are important. So now we have 2 plus square root of 36, plus or minus, right?
That's a plus.
Yeah, plus or minus, right?
Yeah,
Then we have x equals 2 plus or minus 6, which is the square root of 36. Do not cross off the 2's.
That'd be your answer.
We need to simplify. So what is x equal to 2 plus 6 over 2 or 2 minus 6 over 2? Got to split up into plus and the minus.
4.
Yeah.
What is the little arrow pointing out mean?
I'm just trying to say like the order of my steps.
Oh, no, I know. Like on the calculator. It was like,
Oh, it means raised to a power. So you could do squared, which is a button, but if you want cubed or to the 4th power, use that little caret to write a 3, like to the 3rd or 4th. So now we have 2 plus 6 is
oh.
8. 2 minus 6 is -4.
Like,
2. Good. Careful. 4 -2.
I was talking about
8.
So this would even need decimals. Why didn't it need decimals? It was a nice one. Okay, hold on. If I say by any method, which I probably will. But the test is there are going to be places, since it is new this chapter, where I say quadratic formula. Okay? There are going to be places where I say complete the square because it's new this chapter. Right? Okay. Now, what did I just do this whole page to help us review? 4 different ways to solve for. Wait a minute. What was the wording? What are we finding in all of these? X-intercepts or zeros, or like I say,
C.
using
Or
what were the words there at the top? Zeros or x-intercepts or
real solution.
real solutions. Those are the 3 different names for what we are doing. We're trying to figure out when the quadratic equals 0. Now guys, let me just prove a point to you real fast. Were we able to do the quadratic formula here in part D? Yes. But if you know how to factor, could we have done this faster?
Yes.
Couldn't we have said what multiplies to be -8 and sums to be -2? -4 and 2 would sum to be -2. If the last sign is negative, the signs, they must change. X minus 4, X plus 2. Couldn't we have gotten -2 and 4 maybe a little faster? Yeah. Now pause. If you're bad at factoring, maybe quadratic formula is safer and feels better too because you know what to do. Take A, take B, take C, plug in, simplify. It might be messy, but I got this. Factoring, you kind of have to work the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So, it's up to you. Different ones of you have different strengths. Different ones of you have different strengths, which is why in the end of homework you get to choose. Okay? Now, we do have one thing to talk about in class today that's new. But the nice thing is, it's just a special name for a special part in the quadratic formula that can tell us some special clues. So here we go, notes open, word for word. Notes open, word for word. Who knows, maybe on your test I might ask you to give me what is the discriminant. Or I might ask you to give me, state the quadratic formula. Maybe I'll give you some points just for knowing these. Maybe it'll be the bonus. Haven't I done these bonuses?
It's just the
It's just the b squared minus 4, you see, that's it.
the
Just that part. Nope, not the square root, just that part. It gives us some clues about how many answers. And that is the other part of homework.
Do you write that too for the screen?
Yes, because that is how you're going, that's what you need to use for these types of questions in homework. I showed you the last section of homework. Says solve using any method, and that's what we just did in our warm-up. We showed the different methods you get to choose for homework. There are different times, different ones are easier, but you get to choose which ones to try on your own. Now, wait and pause real quick. Just those of you that love factoring, listen to me real quick. Those of you that are like, I'm pretty good at factoring, I think I want to use it. In the quadratic formula, you realize sometimes answers have decimals, right? If for quadratic, if the answer would have a decimal, don't factor. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to work out. That's just a technique. But the nice thing is, don't try to factor. Some of you are like, I like factoring, it'll be easy, but quadratic formula shows that sometimes the answers are messy with decimals. If the answer is messy with a decimal, we would not want to factor. Now you're like, well, how am I going to know that unless I try quadratic formula? Discriminant. The discriminant will tell you. The discriminant will tell you. So the discriminant will not only help us for this question that's up here, finding how many. If you have a highlighter, I would highlight how many in homework. The two sections I'm going to show you right now. Oops, not right now. There we go. Above the any method section. Guys, look at these directions. Isn't this asking us to determine the number of solutions? How many? It's just asking us how many solutions. This section, find the number of x-intercepts. How many solutions? These are the same type of question. Now, the problems look a little different, and we'll see that in examples. But it's the same question of just how many answers. And you guys already kind of know the options for how many based on the graphs that we've seen before. Let me show you a couple graphs for each of these cases. There are 3 different things that can happen with the U shape. Looking for x-intercepts. It is possible for a parabola to hit 2 times on the x-axis. It is possible for a parabola to hit 2 times on the x-axis. And that is an example like this first case. It is possible for a parabola to hit 1 time. Hold on, this one's actually hitting 2 times, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. To hit 1 time. So it only have 1 x-intercept. And then it is possible for a parabola to hit, this is like the third case, no times. Now on your quizzes there were some graphs and I was asking you for how many solutions or what are the solutions. You guys were able to look at the graphs. In these types of problems you'll be given equations like you just saw in the homework, not graphs. And I want you to realize that sometimes you will have 2 solutions, aka 2 x-intercepts. Sometimes you will have 1 solution. And sometimes you will have no solutions. And guess what can tell you that? The discriminant. Because the discriminant, if you just try b squared minus 4ac, if the discriminant is greater than 0, aka a positive number, you will always have 2 solutions. And people who like factoring, if the discriminant is a number that does not have a nice square root, factoring is not even worth trying. The discriminant is a positive number. There are 2 solutions, and people who like factoring, if the discriminant is a nasty number like 22, square root of 22 is a decimal, do not try factoring. And number 2, if the discriminant ends up equaling 0, there will only be 1 solution. And number 3, if the discriminant ends up being less than 0 or negative, there will be no solutions. Now, I'm going to go ahead for sake of time, and I'm going to go straight to examples. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore the examples on this page. Let's just go look at examples on the next page. Because all we have to do is plug in to the discriminant A, B, and C, not even do the whole formula, and we will know how many solutions, and to be honest, whether or not we should try factoring if we like it. So question, kiddos, before we start, what is the formula for the discriminant again?
B squared minus 4ac.
Good. Discriminant. I spelled it. Discriminant, right? So just plugging into the discriminant. So here we go. I want us to find one of each case. All right? What is A in this problem?
Well,
Negative 1. What is B? 4. What is C?
-4.
So if I plug into B squared minus 4AC, who goes in the B squared spot? Who B is? Who goes in the 4A spot? -1. C spot, -4. Now be careful with PEMDAS. Do your 4 squared first, exponents first, which is 16, minus 4 times -1 is -4. -4 times -4.
Is it going to positive 4?
Technically, Angel, I went ahead and wrote my negative. So I'm just leaving everything the way it is. Look at my highlighting. 4 times -1 is -4. -4 times -4 is positive 16. What is my discriminant? 0. What does that mean? How many solutions? If you look at your chart, what does it say? 1 solution. 1 solution. What if I look at the next example? Should I get A, B, and C right now the way it's written? No. What do I do first? Move the 1.
Do the final.
Leave them all to be on one side. I get 6x squared plus 2x plus 1. B squared. Sorry, A equals 6, B equals 2, C equals 1. Just making sure you guys can see all the numbers.
It's like, why did you do 1 and not plus or minus 2?
I'm getting it all on one side. The fastest way to get them all on one side is only to move the 1 instead of moving the other 2. B squared minus 4AC. If I do my squared first, wait and pause. Oh, guys, the discriminant is what? A negative number. What does that tell me according to my chart? No solution. Pause and not done. I said we had to get 1 of each type. Let's go see if we can find a 2 solution one. This question looks a little different. It just says how many x-intercepts. But guess what that means? X-intercepts are when you set a quadratic equal to 0. And it's the same thing we've been doing. So if I was to do you guys want to be done sooner, right? Do this one instead.
A is no solution.
Yeah, we'll do B instead. Because I need to get you guys 1 or 2. Question. A is what? B is what?
B is -1.
What is C?
No, it's also
Good. If it's not there, we say, and there's nothing to move, we can say C is 0. So if we do B squared minus 4AC, this becomes 1, this becomes 0.
it's fine.
The answer is 1, which means I have a positive discriminant. A positive discriminant is 2 solutions. Kiddos, look at me real quick. I'm going to give you the homework. Good job today. Thanks for helping me out. We only went long because it was hard. Take a picture of the homework. Homework tonight should be faster, I hope.
Hope you feel better, Miss D.
55 and 56 tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was right there, and then I got picked up to the home. I got picked up. I get it. tonight, yes. But for the past ones, I still can't figure them out.
For 9, 4, the last
It was
section.
like 53, 55. I didn't do it, so like, can I finish them all? And then bring them in?
If you have questions, I told a little meeting after school.
Oh god, okay, nope.
It's 1:30. Oh, you can't do it. What is that?
Well, 7 period.
If you remember, maybe I could look like over one question. When you do corrections, I think it's something we need to just see when we do corrections.
I'm scared of the test. If you put like, I think that is better if you put like you show us before so
For the quiz, it was to look at the review.
yeah, but like why they don't give us the choice before now? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Because you have to be able to solve. If I give you choices, actually. The only way the choices make easier is if you don't know, you can guess one and maybe you guess right, but that's not.
no, but I mean like I know that like each person have like their own way to solve. Like for example, to me, it's not for this is quadratic. Like the whole formula,
Yeah, but
that's more safe.
I know, but I need you to know how to do completing the square. I'm not gonna make you do factoring. I'm not gonna make you do, I might make you do square root. Let me stop the video.